Okay, so today our goal is to start off with orientation and give a little bit of background on orientation, talk a little bit about orientation, then go into onboarding. So for all of us, we all know that orientation really begins hopefully before the first day when people start their job. But I wanted to share with everybody today some jaw-dropping statistics. And I know that there's a lot of different sources for information, and so some of the information we see in HR may vary by a few percentage points or so. But for all of us, I would like for us to think about our numbers right now. So 69%, according to O.C. Tanner, who's a leader in the employee engagement industry, when they look at retention, their statistic is that 69% of employees are more likely to stay with a company for 3 years if they experience great onboarding. So that's a real big, significant number. We all know that turnover is one of those numbers that we need to monitor. And if we are spending more time orienting people than keeping them at our organization, that can really have a huge impact on us. And then our next number, 100% to 300%, that is the number that O.C. Tanner states turnover costs each of our organizations, somewhere that each person is going to actually cost about 100% of their salary to get back. And when they look at that, it sounds like a real big number. I'd like to say maybe it was a little bit less than that. But what you're really looking at is the time and effort that it takes to advertise, recruit, select, perhaps administer pre-assessment or pre-hire tests, post-offer drug screens, the efforts that people put in from an onboarding perspective, and all those things. So that's why that number looks so large. And the last percentage is 60%. 60% of companies today fail to set milestones or goals for new employees. So what happens is we may tend to be really excited about hiring somebody and we're ready to orient them, but we don't actually set any milestones or goals. So they come into an organization and they're like, gee, I wonder what I'm supposed to be doing next. That's one of those things that sometimes a lot of organizations fail to do. So something to think about. So let's take a look at successful orientation process and what actually goes into a successful orientation process. One of the first steps that I think really can help us establish a great orientation system for our employees is to actually set goals. And what I mean by this is not, hey, I want to hire 15 people and I want them to start on the 3rd week of this month. Really setting goals is what do you want your orientation process to be like? What is your goal for an employee who's brand new to the organization? What should that employee walk away with after that first or second day of orientation? So it could be a goal as simple as I need to get this employee up to speed as soon as possible. I need them to be able to access technology. I need them to be able to input data at X amount of speed. I might need them to be able to work a certain piece of equipment in a factory setting. But that is really, what is your goal for orientation? Another goal could be really to help them feel welcome. Get them acclimated to the organization as quickly as possible. Connect them to your mission. Those are all things that I think we need to take just a few minutes when we look at our orientation process and say, what is ultimately our goal for every new hire when they attend our orientation? Another characteristic of a successful orientation process is, if at all possible, let's see if we can get some of that paperwork out of the way before they start. I know, and I remember there was one position I took at an organization, and I almost had a binder full of pieces of paper that I had to fill out. And it was almost, I swear, maybe like 2 or 3 hours of fill this form out, sign your name on this, turn this direct deposit slip in, oh, we need to do an I-9 form. So there's a lot of opportunities in today's technology-filled world to actually try and set up some onboarding by use of technology. If you don't have that, you can certainly still send an email out ahead of time with some of the forms that you will require them to fill out. Ask them to fill out as much as they can ahead of time, but then always you need to remind them to bring those forms back with them because they may show up at orientation and have forgotten that form. So that's always something that's good for you to do ahead of time, and that's gonna help people spend less time filling out paperwork and more time getting to learn about the organization. Another characteristic of a successful orientation is we really need to orient our newcomers right away. And in our role at Integrity HR, we see all sorts of different things that happen during the hiring process. And especially as HR managers, a lot of times we know that the operations people need to fill a position immediately. And they find somebody, we may have participated in that hire process, and instead of waiting for the next scheduled orientation date, your operations leader comes and says, hey Karen, I know we don't have orientation for 2 weeks, but I really need Bob to start because I really need somebody to fill this role. I'm behind in production, or I don't have anybody answering the phones. Really need this person to start right away. And so inevitably what happens is they may start right away, but they're not really starting an orientation. So they may actually report in the middle of a pay week or an orientation period. We quickly fill out the bare minimum amount of paperwork that we need to get them started on the payroll system, and then we let them go to their assigned work area. Then what happens is they've been working for about a week and a half, and then we bring them in with the rest of the new hires, and all the new hires, it's their first day, and Bob's already been on the job for a week and a half, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. And sometimes even we forget about Bob, and we do orientation without him. So really, to be successful, best practices is to make sure that we get Bob in, but his first day is as good as everybody else's first day, and have him attend the orientation session. I know that's difficult, and I know we always have to partner well with our operations people, but best practices, if we can hold off and get Bob on day one with the rest of the new hires, that would be great. Another tip, and I share this because this happens a lot, is if you have a new hire and it's your new hire, make sure you're there that first day. We've obviously taken a lot of time. We've done a lot of pre-selection. We've done our behavioral interviews. We're excited about the candidate, but the worst possible time for a new hire to start is when their manager is not there on the first day. Your manager needs to be part of the welcoming committee, so to speak, when that person arrives. So let's really try and make sure that the new hire starts and the manager's there on the same day. Another characteristic of a successful orientation process is really starting off with very general parts of your orientation. You want to start with the big picture. You want to start with the overall, organization specifics, and then you're going to start to go very specific. So start with your mission, your vision, your values, the history of the company, how his or her role relates to the overall organization. But definitely you want to start with the big picture so that they can understand the organization before you get too granular and you start getting into the specific requirements for that person to be successful in their position. And it's also not a bad idea at this point in the orientation process to partner your new hire with a mentor or a buddy. And it doesn't have to be an official mentor program that you have a policy and procedure wrapped around. Just, identify some key people in your organization that can show your new hire, hey, here's where you put your lunch, here are some of just those kind of unspoken cultural items of the organization, just to really kind of make that person feel at ease. And I just talked about this, but the mission, the vision, and the values, this needs to be part of your orientation process. As we move into onboarding in a few minutes, onboarding is really a series of events, and it goes over a period of time. Orientation is very specific. It's perhaps a day or two. And often, if we don't take the time to talk about our vision, our mission, and our values, it doesn't get covered anywhere else. So it's real important to make sure that we're able to describe this to our new hires in such a way that it sticks. So an organization that I used to work for used this as an opportunity to bring in the executive team members. And rather than do a kind of a boring PowerPoint, kind of like what you guys are watching right now probably, but rather than doing a PowerPoint, they actually brought the executive team in during lunch. And each of the executive team members spoke to the new hires about what drew them to the organization, what the company's values meant to them on a very personal basis, and they actually would describe instances in the work environment where they saw employees exhibiting the organization's values, carrying out the mission of the organization, and really how it all tied back into the vision of the organization. And it was a very casual, kind of a lunch and learn, but as we got our feedback from the employees, the new hires, they said that was probably one of the most powerful aspects of the orientation process, because they got to meet the executive team and they got to actually hear something that wasn't kind of that canned response that we all memorized. You know, here's our vision, here is our mission, and here's our values. So something to think about. It's great if you can kind of shake things up in such a way that will make a lasting impression. Another characteristic of a successful orientation process is to involve many stakeholders. And I know, just based on my experience in HR, typically orientation and even onboarding always seems to fall on the HR manager's shoulders. Everybody else in the organization says, hey, HR takes care of that. HR, you orient these people. HR, make sure that they're onboarded. And it's very difficult. It should not just be the HR manager's responsibility. As you involve many stakeholders, you are actually allowing those stakeholders to establish relationships with the new hire, and again, introducing them to different departments, bringing people together, and really making sure that your information is not siloed just by the viewpoint of HR. But when you bring in, let's say you need to have a presentation about expense reimbursements, bring in the finance people, have them be a part of that. It's very, very effective, and now your new hires know who to go to in the finance department if they have a question about their reimbursements. Another characteristic of a successful orientation process is to relate directly back to the business plan. This is very similar to the vision and the mission and the values, but often we fail to tell our new employees what our business plan is. In most of our activities, whether it be in orientation or onboarding, we never really talk about our business plan. And then when that new hire goes back to their office or wherever their work area is and talk about the business plan that they learned about in orientation, then their coworkers are like, oh, I didn't know we were doing that. How did you learn that? So often what happens is we as leaders will talk and develop a business plan, but we don't disseminate it to all the employees. So best practice, talk about it during orientation, and then also best practice just for any business plan is make sure that everybody knows what your business plan is so that everyone knows how their position directly relates back to the business plan and back to the success of the organization. Another characteristic of a successful orientation process is we all have to plan for that situation where we may be orienting short-term employees, seasonal employees, part-time, people that are not actually fitting the mold of the rest of the typical new hire. So as we develop our orientation process, we have to think about what about those folks that are only going to work the summer. So I like to think about an organization that I saw growing up. I'm originally from Northwest Ohio, and there was a great amusement park, and I loved going to this amusement park, and some of you may have heard, it's called Cedar Point. And they traditionally only had seasonal workers that would work during the summertime. So it was hard because they were in high school or they may have been in college. Cedar Point developed an orientation program where a couple weekends before the season started, they brought all the new hires in and taught them how to run the rides, the roller coasters, how to work the park. And then the weekend before the park opened, they would have the new hires and their family members actually attend kind of a soft opening of the amusement park so that the employees could get used to running the roller coasters and the rides with people in them. And then the family members really got to actually experience kind of the park from a different perspective. Now, this was a long time ago, Elizabeth, so I don't even know if they still do this. So Elizabeth's a lot younger than me. You all can't see her, but I'm not even sure if they still do this. But it was really kind of a neat thing because they were planning for the seasonal worker. But another thing that we have to think about is it's really easy, or it's a lot more simple to orient the typical office person, whether they be non-exempt or exempt, the person who comes to work every day, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. But a lot of our participants on this webinar also have those manufacturing environments, the factories, the production. And so we have to also figure out how do we successfully orient these types of workers where, first of all, they may not have technology at home. So it may be difficult to actually get them to fill out their paperwork ahead of time. And then a lot of their orientation occurs on the job. So we have to be creative when we think about this. And is it still maybe partnering those people up with a buddy or a mentor they're actually going to shadow that person on the factory floor? Is it also developing some YouTube videos and leveraging an LMS system that we'll talk about later that actually shows them the right way to operate machinery or equipment? So things to think about. We have to be very, very creative. So things that might also go into this is to make sure that you're prepared for all of these scenarios. Again, a lot of us don't have seasonal workers, so we don't need to do that. But we may be hiring some interns, or we might be orienting some folks that are only working part-time. So our orientation process needs to take all of these things into account. All right, so another characteristic of a successful orientation process is paying attention to who's in charge. We chose this slide because everybody looks happy, everybody looks engaged, they don't want to be anywhere else but that orientation. Now, all of us know that that's not how a lot of our new hires look. These people are engaged, they're ready to start work. The person who's facilitating the class looks like he's just on top of his game, and he's a great facilitator. But the people that you choose to join your orientation really need to be the cheerleaders. They need to be the people who are good at public speaking, who are passionate about working at the organization. Because even though you've already hired these people, those first 6 months are critical to keeping those employees. So often people will start a job and people will say, it's not what I thought it was. Well, how do we get people over that hurdle? Well, again, a good orientation, a good onboarding, but also making sure that the people who are part of the process are really, really just kind of your in-house cheerleaders. They have a personal commitment to the success of the orientation group. They can, have dialogue rather than monologue. They're excited to be a part of the process, because the worst thing you can do is have somebody who is not personally motivated to be a part of your orientation process. Be honest. Honesty is the best policy. So this is kind of interesting to have as part of the orientation process, because we all like to think that aren't we always honest? But we know that we as HR leaders really want everything to be perfect for our new hires. We want, from the minute that they walk in the door, everything's perfect, everybody's happy, all the computer technology is working, there's not issues with signing on to a system. It's kind of the rainbow, the world of rainbows and unicorns and, and all those kind of fun things. But we know that's not always going to happen. So we need to make sure that we're completely honest. We want to market our company. We want to be very, very positive. But at the same time, we also know that sometimes there's some warts in the organization. And I say that because, again, I came from a healthcare industry, and probably one of the hardest struggles we had was our electronic medical record. It just was not intuitive. It was cumbersome. It's kind of clunky to operate. And rather than gloss over that, we wanted to be completely honest with our folks during the actual interview process, but then also during the orientation process to say something like, hey, we know that part of your orientation and onboarding is going to be learning our system. And we're going to apologize in advance because it's not the system that we really, really love, but it's what we have today. So make sure you ask lots of questions. Don't assume that it's intuitive. We've created tip sheets, but we have extra training scheduled just so that you feel comfortable with the electronic medical record system. So again, being honest, it should really be part of your orientation program. Another characteristic of a successful orientation process is maintaining consistency. So I don't know about you all, and Elizabeth, I'm sure this has never ever happened to you, but sometimes, and again, HR leaders, we know how we want things to be ran, we know how things should be working, and we know that organizations have some very specific requirements, templates, processes that they want everybody to use. Well, that's great. The new hire gets that during orientation and maybe even during onboarding. But the buddy or the mentor that you may have partnered that person up with says, hey, listen, we don't do it that way. I know they told you to do it that way in orientation, but here's a shortcut, and it's going to save you lots of time. So let me show you around the system, and you don't really have to do it that way. Just forget what they told you in training. Well, that's not such a great thing, because there's a reason that we have a system or a process established, and that can really derail your orientation process as well as that employee's continued employment, because they're going to wonder why are they teaching one thing during orientation and onboarding, and then when I get to my supervisor or my mentor or my buddy, they're showing me a different way. So a disconnect is going to be created between the employee, what has been told to the employee, and what is actually happening. Now, I know it's hard to prevent all that, so be careful. When you are selecting somebody to be a mentor or buddy or somebody who's going to do that on-the-job training, reinforce that you want these certain things to be taught to this employee so that there is some consistency. Because again, those first 6 months can be very, very trying on a new hire. There's a lot of new information. You want them to commit. You want them to stay within the organization. And you want that transition into the organization to be smooth and seamless. All right, so we've talked about orientation, and now we want to talk a little bit about an onboarding program. So the difference between orientation and onboarding is that, again, orientation is almost like a single event or a single day or two. It's very specific. It started with very general information and got specific. Well, an onboarding program is really a series of events. And in all actuality, some companies could take almost a year or two to onboard an employee, and that sounds kind of daunting, but there is a company out there, it's a cosmetic company, that has developed such an intense onboarding program that once you are successfully onboarded into the company, you actually can get some CEs, some continued education credits for the classes and for the onboarding program. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Another thing I wanted to mention was kind of an interesting thing that I saw. I think it was on LinkedIn. So those that look at LinkedIn probably recognize the story, but there was a recent post about a way that Zappos weeds out their people during the orientation and onboarding process. Again, the cost of turnover with employees is huge, and so rather than have somebody at Zappos go completely through the orientation onboarding, they offer the employee, if they're unhappy and if they think that they've made a bad choice in joining the Zappos family, Zappos will pay that employee $4,000 to leave the organization because they feel that strongly about having the right people in the right seats in the organization, because they don't want bad attitudes to come out of orientation and onboarding into the organization. Now, again, Elizabeth, I don't believe everything I read on social media, but I thought that was kind of an interesting story, and it came off of a Zappos post. So again, not sure if that's true. I would not suggest that because that is not a best practice, but I thought it was interesting that Zappos just felt that strongly about their orientation onboarding process. And I think it also says something about our hiring process. You know, the success of orientation and the success of onboarding really starts with making that right selection for the candidate. And then making sure you actually not only recruit the person to start with the organization, but then you're also constantly re-recruiting. So some organizations, as people enter their organization, may do something like have the manager send a welcome letter before the employee starts, saying, hey, glad to have you on board, looking forward to seeing you on April 24th. You're going to have a great first couple days, and then we're going to start on an onboarding program for you. Here's a few things to keep in mind on day one. So some companies do that. Other companies may actually send out a welcome card. Can't wait to see you on the 24th. We've got you all set up. Again, pre-planning on orientation, making sure you have things set up, making sure that employee has an ID to sign in, making sure that person actually has a workspace. I don't know if anybody out there has ever shown up at a job and said, we knew you were starting today. Sorry we don't have your desk. Sorry we don't have your laptop. We're going to get that, but we're really excited for you to be here. So we figured you'd be in orientation for a couple days, so we'll get everything going by the end of the week. That's not a lasting first impression. And remember, you only get one opportunity to make that first impression. So let's say, for the sake of our seminar today, we've done a great job. We've got the person oriented. We've reached out to them ahead of time, and now we want to onboard them. So creating a successful onboarding program really makes you do kind of a look at your entire process. I think you really have to think, how does somebody learn how to do their job here at the company? Again, it could last several months. It could last several years. It's what you make out of it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And why even be concerned about onboarding? I mean, we've got them oriented. Somebody's going to show them how to do the job. No, that's not the right answer. Companies lose 25% of all new employees within a year. So if you don't do a good job of onboarding, you risk losing that employee. And obviously, we've already shared how much turnover costs, so it's really, really important that you do a great job of onboarding. And employees who attend a well-designed onboarding orientation program are 69% more likely to remain at the company for up to 3 years. So I don't know about you all, but if I'm going to put all this effort into recruiting somebody, getting them oriented, and getting them onboarded, I'd like to have them stay with us for at least 3 years. So other benefits of a good onboarding program is obviously if you've had a vacancy, the other people feel the strain of that position that hasn't been filled. So when you have good onboarding and that person's able to come out of onboarding and do their job, you're going to see morale increase, you're going to see productivity increase, you're going to see the costs of your turnover go down, your screening costs will go down, your testing costs, things like that. So there's a lot of things that are significant returns on your investment if you can create a good onboarding program. This slide, everybody's happy. We've successfully onboarded. We've got somebody who's actually made it through orientation. They're coming to their first meeting. This group is so excited that this person's here. They can't wait to start unloading some of their assignments on this person. So obviously, there's success here. They're going to be integrated with the company. They're going to have some clear goals and missions. They feel welcomed. This group is excited because they finally, I think this group might be during the tax season. They must be CPAs, and they finally have somebody else who's going to help them get all those tax returns filed. So I think that's keeping in with our tax deadlines. So again, successful onboarding looks like that person's integrated with a company's mission and vision. They've bought into the company. They have clear goals. They know where they fit within the organization. If it's not such a successful onboarding, the rest of the group knows it. And honestly, your employees, when you bring somebody in, they're going to tell you whether it was a good hire or not. They're going to tell you if that person did a good job in getting to know the organization. And when you don't do a good job either selecting the employee, orienting, or onboarding the employee, your employees are devastated. So this group kind of given us the idea that we didn't do such a great job. And obviously, we're probably going to be at the drawing board again, and we'll be doing another orientation class, bringing a new group of new hires in. So how do I create a better onboarding program? Well, that's a good question. What we want to be able to do is and this is, again, something that I don't think everybody does, and we've talked about this earlier. A lot of organizations believe that HR is solely responsible for the orientation and the onboarding of every single employee. Well, one of the tips I want to share with you is the idea of creating an onboarding steering team. An onboarding steering team are people who are engaged in bringing new people to like the highest productivity of their position. These people could be project managers. There could be an executive sponsor in this group. They could be department managers, human resource folks, maybe even some new employees who have just gone through orientation, or employees who have been around for 12 to 18 months. This steering committee is going to help you look at your onboarding process. And so it's not just going to be on your shoulders anymore. It's great to get kind of that multidisciplinary team, because when you have buy-in from people, whether it be in the finance department or the production line or something like that, they now become a key stakeholder in the success of the employee. This steering committee is going to be able to review how we're doing things. They should meet probably more frequently at the beginning as you form this committee, and then maybe on an annual basis to look at how the onboarding has how successful your onboarding has been, maybe looking at the retention numbers. I know a lot of us will look at turnover, but perhaps one of the numbers the steering committee could do is let's look at how many employees that we've hired in the past year have stayed for the first 3 months, the first 6 months, the first 9 months, and then the first year. So these guys can kind of see, okay, if we lose folks between the 6 months and maybe the 9-month mark, what's occurring at that point in time? Is there something significant? Have we increased their productivity levels? Are there stressors within the work organization that somehow we can remove? Because our ultimate goal is to really retain the people who we have oriented and onboarded. So this onboarding steering team is going to be responsible for gathering supporting data and information. So what do I mean by that? Well, what they're really going to do is they are going to be your folks that can help look at your processes and your programs. So how is your hiring process? So from start to finish, when you make a decision to hire someone, is an offer letter sent to that employee at home? And then is there a letter that or a note card from the manager welcoming that employee to the organization? How do employees get set up in their technology? Is that done before day one? Is that communicated to your technology department, or do we wait until day one to say, hey, we got a new hire, can we get an ID and maybe some email accounts set up? Are there other pre-orientation programs that we can add to this orientation process? And what about our onboarding? What is everything that they're going to be doing during their onboarding? And are there specific things that we need to do as an organization for specific groups of folks? So are there some pre-work, maybe reading some manuals before they start or something like that? So again, this group is your onboarding steering team. So it's not going to fall just on your shoulders as the HR person. These folks are going to help kind of get the ball rolling and look at the information. And as part of that, and I know a lot of us have done strategic planning, so this might seem kind of odd to have this in this slide, but when we as leaders go off on a strategic planning retreat, a lot of facilitators do vision summary questions or visioning exercises. And it might seem kind of strange to have in the onboarding process, but it's a great opportunity to get ideas and kind of get that free flow brainstorming concepts from your onboarding steering team. So some of the things that you might want to have this team think about are questions like, what does our current onboarding strategy look like? What are we going to do? And how many people do we typically hire? Is it a lot? Is there a certain time in the year where we need to be prepared to hire more staff? It might be a seasonal business. It might be that you go into a heavier production at a certain point in the year. What are some of the things we want to focus our employees on during onboarding? What are those key takeaways? What do we want to use this time to really kind of instill in our new hires? What are we doing well? So what are some of the things that we do well? So, for example, one of the things that we do at Integrity HR is we have these kind of gift jars of neat little office supplies and candy bars. We call it the office survival kit. And that's at your desk on day one. And then when I first started Integrity HR, we had a whiteboard on the wall, and somebody had written, welcome, Karen, we're so excited to have you. And just recently, when we added a couple new folks to our team, we had balloons waiting at the front door with a sign on the front door with all of their names saying, welcome, we're so excited to have you here. And then we had a lunch with everybody, so they had an opportunity to get to know the rest of the team. So what are some of those things that we're doing really well? So those are things I wouldn't want to lose. But what are some of those other things that maybe we could do better? So do we need to update some systems? Do we need a better handbook? Do we need to have better defined processes? And what is it that's going to really make a difference for people to want to stay with us, but also do a really good job? So employee retention is essential, but we want to retain the really good employees. So what is it that we need to do as a committee to ensure that that new hire completely understands and knows what to do in their position? The other thing that should be in here is, what can we measure success by? So again, let's look at, maybe this group is charged with looking at retention numbers for new hires. Maybe they're in charge of also looking at how they can quantify what the mentors or the buddies are doing with their new hires. Maybe it's how many times does the hiring manager have check-ins with that new employee during this onboarding. What types of measurements? Because that'll help the committee really be able to focus future efforts. So if they see something isn't working, they can kind of look at those numbers and say, okay, maybe we need to tweak this here. Setting spirit goals. This is really one of my favorite slides, and I always think about goals, and I think about SMART goals and all that kind of stuff. And as we were putting this PowerPoint together, we came across an idea of setting spirit goals. So it's not how many times do you say go team go, but it's really actually geared towards kind of a combination is what I want to say. It's not just onboarding, but it's also really trying to get people engaged and you being engaged with those folks. So I'm going to go through each of the letters of spirit and talk a little bit about that. So the S in spirit stands for specific. And so when you set goals for your onboarding process, and we talked a little bit about this earlier with the orientation, but when you set goals for the onboarding process, you want to be specific about what you want or don't want to achieve. During the onboarding process, you should have goals that are tangible and measurable. So getting all employees up to speed is really not a great goal because it's really hard to measure that unless you have a specific speed limit that you want everybody to get to, and everybody has to be driving at 55 miles an hour by a certain time. That goal is not going to be great. So what you really want to do is kind of think about what is the ultimate goal for a new employee during the onboarding phase. So a good example is if you have a data team, a data entry team, you may want them to be able to enter 100 records per day by the end of the first week of onboarding. So that gives you a goal, and that also tells the employee what's expected of them. Because, Elizabeth, I don't know about you, but I like to know what people expect so I can be successful. If you don't tell me, I'm going to make some assumptions, but if you tell me what my onboarding goal is and what success looks like, then I know what I need to be focused on. And so again, the employee wants to, we all want the employee to be successful, but most of all, the employee wants to be successful. So the P in spirit stands for prizes. And I like prizes. I like trinkets. Everybody knows that I like those types of things. So we couldn't use trinket because then it wouldn't spell words. So P is for prizes. So we need to provide rewards at different points in the process of this goal of onboarding. So particularly if onboarding tends to be a little bit longer. But let's go back to the data entry example. So if my goal is to be able to enter 100 records by 100 records by day by the end of the week, then maybe when I do achieve that, I get some kind of a t-shirt or stress ball or, maybe, I don't know, $5 gift card or something like that to Starbucks. But it's really, again, saying this is an important goal. This ties right into our business plan, and that's why we want to reward those folks who are able to get that. Individual is the I in spirit. So the goal must be something that is relevant to the employee's job and is something that the employee is willing to work on. So obviously you're not going to give a goal that means nothing to that employee, but it really should be, because it's specifically around onboarding and getting that person up to speed. It should be something that's really essential for them to be successful in their job. So it may be a little bit different for everybody, especially if you have different employees or different jobs that people are orienting to. But always make sure that that goal ties back to the business or a personal result for that person, so it becomes very individualized. Review is the R, and so review progress periodically. So if it's important enough to measure, it's important enough to review, it means it's important. So, make sure that the goal makes sense, because sometimes we have the best intentions to set a goal, but then actually when we start measuring, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So don't be afraid to review it, but then also review it with the employee. And if you need to adjust it, that's okay, because sometimes adjustments, happen. But again, it's something that, you need to keep looking at, making sure that what you're measuring is giving you the outcomes that you want from the employee from the onboarding. I is for inspiring. Frame the goal positively. People are not inspired to do negative things, at least most people are not. So make it fun to accomplish. Your team could make a poster at the end of the result. They could frame it. They could post it on the wall. They could take a picture. One of our team building events, and it was really kind of when I first started Integrity HR, we did one of those breakout sessions, and we had multiple rooms going and different teams. Even though my group was not successful breaking out of the room we were locked in, we still had a picture, and we took it and we had it on our bulletin boards because we were still proud of the fact that we came together as a team, and it was a lot of fun for us. The last for T is time bound. So you really want to make sure that you give yourself a deadline for achieving the goal. Don't make it just some, number or some date out in the future. Make sure that they know that at the end of the first week, during your onboarding, we want you to be able to do this. And then maybe at the end of the first 60 days, this is where we want you to be. Split the goal into small parts and give yourself a deadline for each item. And you're really going to see people who are engaged in their onboarding process, that they're engaged in becoming a productive member of the team. So again, this is something that you all as HR leaders do not need to come up with. Your onboarding steering team should be assisting you with this. So we've talked a little bit about some of those key characteristics, but part of what we have to do to be able to get this really awesome onboarding program launched is to actually develop what's that, like the framework of that. So your onboarding program can be communicated in a lot of different ways. We've talked about a mentor, coach, or a buddy, and that's that interpersonal support of onboarding the employee. A mentor is going to be your most involved type of support person, and their goal is to interact with the new employee and to help them develop personally and professionally. So it's a very formalized kind of role that somebody may take on. A coaching program is similar, but focuses on the employee's job-related skills. So a little different. You can have a mentor who's really looking at interacting and helping them develop, build those interpersonal relationships, build their professional skills. But a coaching program is going to focus on very specific job-related skills. So it might be that, again, to kind of go back into a manufacturing environment, how to operate, this type of machinery effectively and efficiently. And then finally, a buddy is like a tour guide. And this is somebody that really helps the new employee find their way around the new workplace and find information. So ironically enough, I don't think we put enough emphasis on buddies. I can relate back to starting a new job. To me, it was almost like being that first day in school when you have relocated to a new high school. Everybody has been in high school for 3 months. They all have their friends. They all have their systems. They all know where their locker is. They all know the nuances of how to get the locker open. And then you, as a new student, show up at the principal's office to get your assignment, your classes, your locker assignment, and you're lost. You are literally, you don't know which hallway is which hallway. You have nightmares about it for months. Well, think about all of your new employees. It's very similar. It's a brand new work environment. They don't know the nuances. If the office hours are 8 to 5, does that really mean 8 to 5? Or does that mean like 8:20 to maybe 5:30? And what are those nuances about that office? Where do I put my lunch? Where do people go? Can I bring a Diet Coke and put it in the refrigerator? I mean, what are those things that I'm afraid to ask because it's going to make me look stupid? But a buddy is your person who's going to say, hey, how do people work this out? Do we wear jeans on Friday? What are those things? So again, communicating can take a lot of different forms, but when you use a mentor or coach or a buddy, it's a great way to get some of those other information or some of the other organizational information out to your new hires. You're also going to have your departmental or company orientation. We've talked about your orientation from a company perspective, but you're also going to have some departmental information that's going to be included in your onboarding program. And then finally, you'll also have very job-specific training. Those are things that everybody needs to know in that role to be successful. And that's why an onboarding program is not going to be a 1 or 2 day program. It's going to be a program that takes some time. And at some point during this onboarding program, and we'll talk about this in a minute, there's going to be some type of an evaluation, some type of, are you able to do this? Are you ready to go solo? Are you ready to be able to go see clients? What are those things that you need to be able to do before you kind of are set free? So your framework, as you develop your onboarding program, and I put this slide up here because I think it's a good reference tool for you, because I think a lot of us get a little overwhelmed when we think about, okay, I've got an orientation program, it lasts a day or two, and I think we do some onboarding, but gee, I want to really do some different stuff, but I'm not sure where to start. So if you use this slide as your framework, you can kind of bite off the onboarding program in smaller bites. So the pre-work of your onboarding, really kind of starts with orientation. What are those things that people are doing before they arrive on the job? Some organizations will actually send some videos to employees before they even start that are very specific about the orientation process. They also go into some specifics about the job, about the organization, and tells them what to expect. Then on the first day, you really that's kind of your orientation period. That's when you're filling out some of your forms. That's when you're getting signed up for maybe some employee benefits. But the interesting thing, statistically speaking, and I'm going to ask Elizabeth this question, so I'm going to make her talk for just a minute, but do you have any idea about the one thing during orientation that is the most often overlooked or not discussed part of orientation that really is very significant to the success of the employee at work?
I'm going to say the employee handbook.
That's right. Yes. So one of the things, and I'm hoping you all are smiling on this because I've done this, I've been guilty of this in the past, is you may have a 60-page handbook and you say to the employee, okay, I'm going to give you this handbook, or the handbook's online. It's a great reference, but I need you to acknowledge that you received the handbook and that you've read it. And honestly, they haven't read it, and they're signing off on this piece of paper. And in all reality, how often do our employees take the time to go back and read the handbook? The only time they typically will read a handbook is when they are disgruntled and they have a question because their boss told them they can't do something. And when they get in trouble for that, or when they are wondering why something isn't allowed, they are told, well, it's in the handbook. Mm-hmm. So that might be the only time they get that handbook out.
Or would they want to know what their PTO is?
Absolutely. So that's the other thing, is when people want to know how much time do I get and how soon do I get to take time, yes, and how many holidays do I get, then they'll open up their handbook. So part of the framework that you really need to consider during your orientation and your onboarding process is, how do you fit the handbook in? And how are you able to make the handbook a part of the orientation onboarding process without making it too dull? So we'll have some ideas for that in a little bit, but this could also be part of your pre-work. When I started at Integrity HR, I received at home a sign-on, and I actually viewed some orientation videos, and those videos had Amy Letke in them, and she actually talked a lot about kind of the rules, the expectations, and a lot of the information that she talked about was from the handbook, but it was a video. So that was considered part of my pre-work. I needed to watch those videos, and there was 8 videos that I needed to watch before my first day. So when I came on the first day, nobody had to go back through, PTO policies, holidays, how to request time off. when my benefits became eligible, what I needed to wear to work, those types of things. That was all taken care of. But then on the first day, we could really focus on some of those key things. So as you look at your general framework, you really need to have your steering committee participate in actually diagramming this. What should happen pre-work-wise? Should the manager be reaching out to the employee with a note? There are automated systems out there that you can use that will generate a note card to arrive in the employee's home email box or home box. So again, something to be thought about. What kind of paperwork do they fill out? And then on the first day, who's meeting and greeting? Is that manager there? Is it the HR leader? Is it a combination? Let's make sure that that first day is just as important for that employee as the rest. So you really want to make them feel, warm and welcome. The first week, again, we're going to talk a little bit about that in the first month and the first year. So as we're developing our onboarding template, what we really want to do is we want to think about what are those things that we can kind of make a systematic process, what's going to be automatic. So again, leveraging technology, you could have emails, you could have, whatever we need to do to really make things a little bit easier. Some organizations use some self-paced training, some learning management systems, again, could be launched before you start at work. So your sample for day one, employee arrives at the office, they're greeted. Hopefully some security policies are completed. If they're getting a key fob or something like that, they're learning how to get into the office. How about a tour? We need to make sure that the person knows how to get around and where the restrooms are located and where their office is and everything else. Then you should also be reviewing the onboarding plan with the employees so they know what to expect. They're here. How long is this going to take? I know I'm filling out paperwork for day one, but what else do I need to know? A lot of examples that organizations have given us in the past is they actually set up Outlook or Google Calendar schedules for that employee so that they see it on their calendar. They know who they're supposed to be meeting with, which department head, and again, that's more on an individual basis rather than a group. For week one, this is really, after they've gone through orientation for a day or two, they're really starting to transition into kind of a normal work. How do I know what to do? How do I access the things on the shared drive? They should also begin to build relationships. And so a best practice for you as a manager or an HR leader is that first week, go ahead and find people who can spend time with your new hire during lunch, if at all possible. Because, people are great. They want to welcome the new hire, but if you don't make a clear plan for that new hire to have somebody to go to lunch with, everybody else has their lunch clicks, they take off, they're eating their lunch, they're eating, out on the picnic table, and you can see that new hire saying, gee, I don't have anybody to eat lunch with. And again, if you go back to kind of the school example, think about the kid in the cafeteria all by themselves at the lunch table. Really make sure that you start thinking through this process with your onboarding steering committee and make it a very planned first week. Also, there's going to be more training in this week. There might be some more policies and procedures that the manager's sharing or the buddy or the mentor, and also maybe some of those unwritten rules. And your buddy and your mentors are going to say, okay, this is how, just so you know, this is kind of how we work the office. Hopefully there's some consistency in the message, as we talked about during our orientation process. One of the things that your hiring manager should be doing at this point is checking in with your new hires, colleagues, coworkers, peers. Now, how's Joe doing? Any concerns, anything I need to be aware of? let me know, because I really want to make sure that Joe's successful. And then also check in with Joe every day. How was your first day? How was your second day? Gosh, we made it to Wednesday. Things going well? Just checking in, because that person needs to know that they're a valuable member of the team. A sample check-in is really something that I like to use usually at the end of the week, but you can use it, kind of throughout the whole onboarding. I've seen this also in employee surveys. SurveyMonkey is not a bad example, but this sample check-in can also provide some data for the onboarding steering committee. So maybe you could do a quick SurveyMonkey at the end of the week and do some open-ended questions like, what was your favorite thing about this week? What was your least favorite thing? And I'm sure people are going to say all the paperwork. And so there are some things we know we can't change. What would you change for future employees? And if you can do these surveys, or these just, even if it's a verbal check-in and write down the answers, this is going to be so super helpful for the onboarding steering committee, because they'll know what they need to kind of tweak during the onboarding process. And then finally, how would you rate your first week on a scale of 1, which is terrible, to 10? So let's go back to that Zappos example. So let's say somebody during week 1, at the end of week 1, rated their onboarding week on a scale of 1 to 10, remember 1 being terrible, as 1. So that Zappos person is going to know right away that this person is either not having a good experience or is not really kind of buying into the company culture. So it might be time to have that conversation with that employee before we go too much further in the onboarding process. So again, kind of going back to our framework, we talked about a 1-month part of your onboarding. At 1 month, you really should be working kind of through that onboarding plan. And again, hopefully the manager and or the HR leader had given the employee kind of, here's our expectations, here's how we're going to onboard you. They should also be working and they could be working with their coach, their mentor, their buddy to achieve goals and complete assignments. So again, kind of going back to setting those goals, having those spirit goals, because we might have a spirit goal that at 1 month we're going to measure. So if that's one of our measurement periods, let's make sure we're doing that. We also want to kind of see if they're adapting to their new role, because really within 30 days you should get a good feel for, does that person seem to be engaged? Are they learning? Are they reaching out? Are they building relationships? If they're not, what do we need to do to kind of bridge that relationship? A lot of people may have completed training or near completing training in this area. And they should also be, checking in with their manager and also bringing up any issues. So there might be some learning issues, there might be some technology issues, maybe they're still struggling accessing a piece of technology. It's good for the manager to understand that. And again, if that employee is checking in with you as a manager, you should hopefully be more aware of that waiting till the end of the month. But sometimes there might be some programs or software applications you're only getting in, 1 or 2 times a month. But from an employer perspective, this is really more of a formal check-in for us. And a lot of organizations might do a 30-day or a 60-day or a 90-day introductory period. But what I'd like to do is challenge this group. And rather than have us as employers evaluating that employee on that first month, I want us to ask, how are we doing? Did we meet your expectations? We recruited you, you went through a hiring process, we told you about the job description, we oriented you, but how are we doing? Have we met your expectations of us? Is there anything that we are failing to do? What do we need to do differently? Because again, let's go back to employee retention and engagement. Having that new hire give us feedback is so powerful. A lot of people see this process in the healthcare industry. There's a formal kind of 30-day check-in. It's very, very powerful because you're going to get information and it's going to be good for you because you can adjust future orientation and onboarding schedules. You can quickly respond. You don't want to lose that employee because remember, that first 6 months is so critical. So this gives you an opportunity to kind of reset and make sure that you're meeting their goals. And then the review. We can't forget about the review. So a lot of organizations will do a 90-day review, maybe a 6-month review. Sometimes there are rate adjustments. Some people may be hired in at kind of a training or apprentice rate, and this review is the time to really evaluate whether they're able to do the key competencies of their position. So you may have a much more formalized review. Again, not a bad idea to do this at least at the end of the introductory period or at a minimum at 6 months. I see a lot of organizations use the annual evaluation at the 6-month mark or at the 90-day mark. That's a tough thing to do because really you're expecting the employee to be completely up to speed on everything they need to do. So my suggestion and recommendation is to abbreviate the review. Maybe just kind of key in on a few specific things that you think measures whether they're heading in the right track. Maybe tie in some of the spirit goals at this point in time. Might be an opportunity for another reward. If you gave them a t-shirt, maybe it's time for a coffee mug or, something else like that. But really make sure that you're doing this on a fairly regular basis with all of your new hires. Once they've been with you for a year, then you can kind of go to an annual review process, but it's not a bad thing. And then it's also a good time for you to check in with the buddy, the mentor, or the coach. Ask them, how's Joe doing? How does he seem to be responding? Is there anything I need to be aware of? Is there any additional training resources that I need to push his way? So we've talked about kind of creating that framework, but let's talk a little bit about how we can customize it and really make it our own. So when we talk about employee engagement, this is another chart that might draw your attention, but let's take a look at this. So 26% of our employees, and this is according to a Gallup poll, 26% of employees are at that engaged state. 56% are not engaged, and another 18% are actively disengaged. Now, I don't know about you, Elizabeth, but this was, when I saw this from Gallup, I was surprised because I'd like to think that more people are engaged. But, when we look at only 26%, that's a little scary statistic. And so I like to kind of classify the 26%, the engaged people. These are your high performers. These are your rock stars. These are the people that you can day in and day out rely on getting the job done, no matter what it takes. These are the people who may be staying, after hours to get something done. Obviously, always getting paid if they're not exempt. But these are the people who you can count on. They're passionate and they are just committed to the organization. The 56% that are not engaged, these are the zombies in your organization. They put their 8 hours in. The bare minimum of effort gets by. And then they go. They're like, hey, listen, doing my job. I got my job description in front of me, doing what I need to be doing. They're not doing anything beyond that. And in fact, they are the ones that will typically be the ones that are kind of mumbling behind the scenes saying, I don't know why we do it this way, but they always do it. It's the flavor of the month. I guess we'll do it. But the 18%, the actively disengaged, these are very disgruntled people. They waste away their hours on the internet or on the phone. You walk by their desk, you walk by their computer, and they're surfing the internet, and they quickly click off because they know you're coming by. They may also actively be sabotaging the work of others. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a new program you're rolling out. And leadership is really excited about it. They're like, oh, this is so great. We're really excited about this. And you've got the 18% that are actively disengaged and like, oh, great. Now they're going to make us do something else. I hope I get more money for this because I really, this isn't what I bought into. This is not what I originally got hired for. So what you want to do is any successful onboarding program, your goal is to increase employee engagement. And when you increase employee engagement, you're obviously going to increase productivity and you're going to reduce turnover. So if you have an opportunity to go into Gallup, there are lots of great free surveys and statistics that are in there that actually show you how much employee engagement and how much those 26% of your staff that are engaged can really help with your productivity, and how that other 72%, 74% are how they really zap your productivity and the employee engagement levels at your organization. So it's not a bad site to look at. So when you have employees who are engaged, you know that they're connecting with all employees. You know who they are because you walk in and you see them and they greet you and they make eye contact. These are the people who want to have the opportunity to advance their career. They want you to be creating a clear vision. And when you create that clear vision, they want to be a part of it. They're essential to your onboarding program. So really, these are the folks that when you start selecting, your buddies and your mentors, and even those people who sit on your onboarding steering team, these are the people that you want. Now, interesting enough, they all look like they're dressed in the same hues of color, so I think you want a little bit more variety and some like pinks and stuff like that, but these guys are really, really engaged. They're also going to help you brand your onboarding program. And so I know that this is always like one of Elizabeth's favorite topics is branding. So we talked a little bit earlier about the welcome workspace. Welcome workspace, whether it means that you have office supplies for your person. There was one place that I started that I couldn't find a pad of paper. Now, thank God I brought paper on the first day, but I had to borrow a pen because I figured I would have paper and pen in my desk area. But, think about the workspace, because your workspace is really going to say, hey, we thought about you. We're excited for you to be here. This is important to us. Sometimes people are allowed to customize their workspace. So it might be that they're allowed to, select the type of file cabinets and, the office supplies that they might have. Maybe they can put a picture on their bulletin board. Make sure that, whatever that person can do, that you make them aware of that. Others, sometimes the only way that you can customize a workspace is having their name, but that's okay. Let them know that that's their workspace. Free gifts, great way. Again, we're onboarding them. A free gift in the employee's workspace, such as branded, stress balls. You can have hats and T-shirts and coffee cups and water, jugs and all that type of stuff. This is your opportunity where they actually get that free gift. And kind of going back to that pre-work and setting people up to get emails at home or letters at home, there are systems out there where you can generate an automated letter that arrives at home and maybe has like a $10 gift card to Target, welcoming them to the organization. Because not only are you actively recruiting and working on retaining your employee, but when that employee's family members see that they got a gift card in the mail from the CEO of the organization welcoming them, you've now recruited the family, and now the family is part of your engaged workforce, so that's important. Lunch and learns. A lot of times, a lot of your onboarding can occur on a lunch and learn. Sometimes it's great to bring together people in like a tenderfoot tea. I was in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and they actually had a networking event in this super cool restaurant for all the new interns in all the downtown companies in Atlanta. So it was an opportunity for everybody to network from different companies, but they were all interns and they were all new to these organizations. So maybe it's a tenderfoot tea or a lunch and learn. Maybe it's bringing in tenured employees with new employees, and they're having lunch together so that there's an opportunity to build relationships. Virtual tools, those are things such as webcasts, web-based training, things like that can add value to your onboarding. The learning management system that we're going to talk about in a minute actually has the opportunity where you can upload just a point-and-shoot video off of your iPhone. Again, always great. Fun and games. We always like to have fun and games, right, Elizabeth?
Yes.
So whether it's a field trip where you're actually doing something like, go-kart racing or bowling, or it could be something like just getting a tour of, if you work for an organization that actually has a production warehouse, or something that's being built, giving them a tour there. Again, fun and games, field trips, things that are going to get people actively involved in what you're doing, hands-on activities. And I'm not sure if they still do this, but a local pizza company that's headquartered here in Louisville, one of their hands-on activities during onboarding is to actually have every new employee spend a little bit of time in the corporate cafeteria making pizzas for the rest of the staff. So they actually learn how to make a pizza from start to finish, and they're actually working in that cafeteria lunchroom during a period of time. And then on an annual basis, they have to go back and work in there, so hands-on activities. I also, a while ago at UPS, and I don't know if they still do it, but anybody who hired on at UPS actually had to spend time in the delivery truck with a delivery truck driver, because that's really kind of the foundation of UPS. And so they would actually ride along and help deliver packages to see what that job was like. There's another healthcare company here in Louisville that not only, they provide in-home services, healthcare services. Not only is that kind of their main product, but they require all of their management team to become certified nursing assistants, so that they all have to learn that job of a nursing assistant, which is kind of cool. Another way to make your program unique are the skip meetings. And those are meetings in which instead of you meeting with your direct report employees, you actually skip that line of reporting and you go to that next level. So it gives people the opportunity to perhaps meet with a level of staff that they normally wouldn't. And then train the trainer is really a great way, asking people to become your trainer. And honestly, if you've ever trained a topic, when you're asked to train that topic, you become that subject matter expert. So not only are you enhancing your onboarding program by having coworkers or good tenured folks be the trainer, but you're also enhancing their level of proficiency and productivity because they are learning that role even at a higher level. So another way, and we talked a little bit about this, but games. Games bring people together and break down barriers. So it improves retention. If the game is related to the material that's just been taught, it significantly improves that retention. So one of the things that we did at an organization is we had to do a lot of safety training. And safety training is kind of boring unless you're in the safety field. So if anybody's out there in the safety field, I think the world of you, because you guys do a great job and you do a great job getting that information out to everyone. But as an HR leader, sometimes it can be a little bit dry. So what we did is we did a scavenger hunt. And we taught the safety material, and then we had our employees find the things that were important to that program throughout the building. So they had to find the fire extinguisher, and if they found the fire extinguisher, they had to grab a tag to prove that they had been there, or took a picture with their iPhone. they had to find the safety officer. So, this material that we presented, they had to find where that person was located. They had to find the first aid kit. They had to take a picture of themselves at the evacuation place if there was a fire in the building. So it was kind of fun. So again, reinforcing that by fun and games is great. Now again, not all fun and games is appropriate for everyone, and you are going to get that person in the group who does not like to have fun. And it could be because they don't like go-karting, they might not like high ropes, low ropes challenge courses. So you have to pick your activities very wisely, and you really have to make sure it's something everybody likes to participate. So in that instance where you might not have people who want to do something that's very active, you can play the game of telephone. Now, for Elizabeth, who's significantly younger than I am, she probably never heard of the game telephone.
I have played telephone.
Okay, you've played telephone. Okay. Well, basically telephone is the game where you start and you might whisper some significant material that you want somebody to remember. It could be the values of the organization, or it could be the mission statement. And then that person has to repeat it to the person next to them whispering. And then the last person who gets that message has to announce it to the group. And it's always kind of fun to see how something that starts off with something very clear and cut, like the values of the organization, somehow get turned around. So that's always fun. We've talked about the scavenger hunt. Bingo. This is kind of a fun thing to get to know everybody in the group, and that's really having people fill out forms ahead of time about what their favorite things are, trying to guess who it is, things like that. So again, it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to have a lot of stuff, but anytime you can reinforce materials or use fun and games to reinforce materials, it's going to improve the retention of your onboarding and orientation. And then finally, something to think about is sometimes we just have to consider revamping our program. And we have to be consciously aware that there is a new group, and we've had this new group entering the workforce, which is our millennial generation. And that millennial generation is very technology savvy. They love to see things that are easy to access, that are kind of gets away from that kind of rigid corporate structure, that there's a clear path for them from a career path, that they know what's expected of them, and that they get that constant reinforcement and measurement so that they know they're on the right course. So I think for a lot of us, we have to think about who are we hiring today? So what do we need to do to revamp that orientation onboarding? Do we really need to invest in new technology? Do we need to have things that are more hands-on? Do we need things that are quicker paced because we have a group of people who are coming into the workforce that don't need maybe the same length of materials before? So we really kind of need to think about who our audience is. And so one of the things that we have implemented, and we have this, and so if you guys are interested in learning more about it, just put something in your message line and we can send you some information. But we do have a learning management system that allows us to really incorporate the things that we've talked about, such as the technology and the videos and some of those orientation systems, into a learning management system that's really easy to use and very cost affordable for folks. It's not expensive, and it's something that is easy to implement and can quickly be implemented. So with that being said, I think a couple to-do things that should be on your list, and I think we're leaving just a few minutes for any questions that may pop up, is as you're looking at your onboarding and your orientation systems, you really need to make sure that you have a consistent and systematic, a comprehensive and strategic plan in place. You need to make sure that as you look at your systems that you tie it in with your organization's message and mission. It should be customized. This is your opportunity to brand your experience. So your new employees, when they come in, They should be like, okay, this is everything I wanted in this organization. And they should know everything about the organization. They should know the purpose. They should know how they fit into the purpose of the organization. How does that role fit into? You should include pre-work as often as you can in your orientation. Get some of that paperwork out of day one, because that day one is really your first impression. And if your first impression of an organization is sitting behind a desk filling out pieces of paper, and you're a millennial, you may kind of second guess if you've made the right decision. So look at what you can do on a pre-work basis. Look at what you're doing on the first day and the first week. What are those assignments? How are you onboarding? Make sure you're setting some goals. Think about using the SPIRIT goals. And most importantly, understand that this is not just your responsibility. Involve your team members, your peers, other members of the management team to help you really create a very strong orientation and onboarding system. I think we are just about out of time. So if you have questions, my email address is up here as well as my phone number. If there's things that we can do for you from an HRO or an HR outsourcing or consulting, let us know. We've got lots of tools, lots of things that we can do for you, and we are here to help. We love having these seminars. We love your participation, and we obviously appreciate your feedback. So please don't hesitate to give us feedback. Elizabeth, I don't know, do we have any questions? Nope.
So far we don't have any.
Okay.
You answered everybody's question.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Well, I do appreciate your participation, and it looks like we're ending about 3 minutes early, which I think everybody will appreciate, and I hope everybody has a great day, and I hope that you were able to take a few tips away from today's seminar.